Welcome to our video on Minnesota Lease and Landlord Tenant laws. Landlords need to know state lease laws to manage their property well. To help you do that, here are some important landlord-tenant laws in the Gopher State. The foundation of the landlord-tenant relationship is the lease agreement. This is a legally binding contract between a landlord and tenant that outlines all rules and terms of the rental relationship. A standard lease agreement is a one-year, fixed-term contract. A Minnesota lease needs to include key terms like rent amount, rent due date, lease term, late fee policies, and pet policies. In addition to basic terms, a strong lease is detailed and covers things like pest control, snow removal, air filter responsibilities, and yard maintenance. Beyond these terms, there are some additional lease requirements in Minnesota. The lease must disclose the name of any individuals allowed on the property for management and provide an address for official notices. Minnesota lease agreements must include specific language from the Minnesota Statutes about preventing unlawful activity. Landlords must notify tenants that the Minnesota Landlords and Tenants Rights and Responsibilities Handbook is available to them. Additionally, the landlord must disclose if the property has any outstanding inspection orders due to a code infraction. If the property is being foreclosed upon or a deed of cancellation has been issued, the lease may not exceed 2 months. Finally, if the property was built before 1978, landlords must provide tenants with a lead-based paint disclosure and pamphlet.
Next, let's talk about key Minnesota landlord-tenant laws. There is no limit on the amount of the security deposit, but it should be reasonable and discussed in the lease agreement. Landlords should return the deposit within 3 weeks of the end of the tenancy. Minnesota landlords must give reasonable notice before entering the property for non-emergencies. We always recommend giving at least 24 hours notice and only entering during reasonable hours. Late fees must be included in the lease agreement and cannot exceed 8% of the monthly rent. Landlords may require tenants to get renter's insurance and can make failure to do so a breach of the lease agreement. Return check fees may not exceed $30 and must be stated in the lease or posted conspicuously on the premises of the rental unit. Fixed-term leases terminate at the end of the period unless otherwise stated. Automatic renewal provisions are only valid if the tenant is given written notice of the provision 15 to 30 days before notice to quit is required. Notice requirements for month-to-month leases should be included in the lease agreement. If there is no period specified, landlords must give tenants 1 full rental period plus 1 day's notice before ending the lease. Minnesota has no limits on rent increases. However, the procedure for rent increases and notice requirements should be discussed in the lease agreement.
Minnesota landlords must keep rental units in reasonable repair. If landlords fail to make necessary repairs, tenants have specific rights, including the right to file a complaint, place rent in escrow with the court, or sue the landlord under the Tenants Remedies Act. Retaliation by the landlord against tenants is strictly prohibited. If a tenant fails to pay rent or violates the lease agreement, the landlord may be forced to start the eviction process. In these situations, landlords must strictly follow Minnesota law and can never resort to self-help eviction methods, such as changing locks or shutting off utilities. Congratulations, you're now ready to create a Minnesota lease and manage your Minnesota rental unit. While Minnesota has some complex lease laws, our lease agreement automatically includes all required disclosures and gives you state assist tips as you build it. It's easy to customize online, and you'll get unlimited access to our electronic signing tool, EasySign. As you manage your rental, remember that we have over 400 property management forms, including Minnesota-specific forms. Visit easylandlordforms.com to start your tenant screening, create a Minnesota lease agreement that's guaranteed to comply with all Minnesota lease laws, and access property management forms.